Mr. Prime Minister and members of the dais and to the rest of the audience, I have what might be called the impossible task. How do I keep your attention for the next few minutes and at the same time say something that's substantive with some entertainment? I have had to follow an incredible MC who should be on TV for comedy. Give her a round of applause. I've had to follow a prime minister that tells you you're becoming the envy of the world. Give him a big round of applause. And I've had to watch you as you move from being very British to very Caribbean with that tat, 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 rat, tat, tat, right? And I noticed how you start shaking your heads and your shoulders. I said, thank you. It was good to see that. It really was. There's something that's welcoming about the Caribbean islands. There's something that suggests you've got brain power and you have hearts. And so I am delighted to be here. I first started hearing so much in recent years about St. Kitts from Ambassador Hull and his wife, Dr. Hull. I'm very proud of them, and they were encouraging me to come and do this. And every speech I give this year, I will make this statement. I was blessed some years ago to ask a certain person to become my wife. And I believe in acknowledging the queen in my life. She is this year with me celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary. Jackie, stand up and give her a round of applause, because she's still a beautiful woman. Thank you. 50 years. I'm very proud of that. And so the message, she looks good too, she really does. And she's brilliant, both things. The message today. What did she say? The message today is one that I will give you in a different way. In your approach to things, you tend to be in some ways traditional, in other ways not so traditional. And the point tonight about science and technology and innovation, after Mr. Prime Minister, after having all that great entertainment, the great speech and all of that, the point tonight is that the way you think about yourselves as a society, as individuals, thank you so much. The way you interact with each other, the language that you hold, that you use all the time, the values that you establish for your children will determine not only who you are today, but who you will be in the future. And every one of us in this room has a story. And it's powerful as I listen to the Prime Minister talking about all of his brothers and sisters. And the story I tell comes because I'm from Birmingham. We in the deep South in our country love stories. How many of you like stories? If I tell you a story, you'll tend to remember it. I'm sitting in the back of church. I don't want to be there in the middle of the week. My parents wanted me to hear this speaker. And the speaker said this to the audience. If the children participate in this peaceful protest, all of America will understand that even our babies, our young people, know the difference between right and wrong. And our children will be able to go to better schools. Now, I was 12, and I had been sitting back in the back of the room being placated with the two things I loved most. Food, I was eating, getting fatter and fatter all the time. I was eating M&Ms, the good kind with the peanuts. You know that kind. And I was doing my little math. And I looked up, and I was so inspired by this guy when he said, and the children will be able to go to better schools. Because you see, in my school, in the schools for children of color, we received the hand-me-down books. And it was not a good feeling. And amazingly, I said, who is that guy? And his name was Dr. Martin Luther King. And I went home. Give Dr. King a round of applause. Throughout the world, we are all better because of what he did. But I was allowed by my parents to go and to participate in this march, and the police commissioner picked me up right on the steps of City Hall. We were trying to pray just for a better education. He picked me up and threw me into the police wagon, and the children, all of us, spent a week, a horrible week in jail. But that week empowered us to understand the most important message that Dr. King gave to me and I give to you tonight. It is that tomorrow can be better than today. Give me a round of applause for what the Prime Minister has been doing. Tomorrow can be better than today. When you can talk about your country gaining the respect of the world in thinking about financial stability, and leaders who are experts and ambassadors who are economists and physicians and a president with a PhD, there's a sense of pride that every person in this country should have as you think about we are St. Kitts and Nevis, that we are a place that believes in education. When I can hear somebody telling me that 60% of the people in your country are under 35. And when I asked him a few minutes ago about hope, and he said, what gives me hope? The young people. And so tonight I want you to think about who are you as a country? What are your values? And where should science and technology feed into that? You see, when I was listening to Dr. King, I was doing my little algebra. But what I learned and what I thought about and what I think about today as a mathematician is that math taught me to think critically. It taught me that every time I have a problem, I may not be able to solve it at first, but if I give it time and I look at it from different angles and I talk with other people about it, it's all possible. Now, the challenge in America, the challenge in our society is we tend to split people up one way or the other. We tend to think, oh, you're somebody in math and science, or you're in something else, history and English. And the first thing I would tell you is this. As the son of an English teacher, my mother was always quoting poetry. William Carlos Williams, the Puerto Rican American poet, said that it's difficult to find news in poetry and literature, and yet men and women die miserably every day because of a lack of what's found there. And so even as I give a talk on STEM, on science and math, I want you to appreciate that at the fundamental, the grounding of who we are will be the humanities and the arts. Give the arts and the humanities a round of applause. That it's important to always keep in mind the ethical considerations. My mama's favorite author was Zora Neale Hurston. And she wrote the book, Their Eyes Were Watching God. And the book begins, ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they come in with this coming on in. And all of a sudden, you see two things happening. On the one hand, you see people seeing the ships there, and the ships seem to stay out there. They never come in. And the point is this. For those of you who've been blessed to get enough education to get a good job, you've seen some ships coming in. You've seen some dreams fulfilled. But for all the people in your country and mine and around the world who don't get the skills that they need, who don't develop the education, what is the future for them? Because without that future, without that education, it's difficult to know what will happen to those children and to those people. And so I want you to think about who you are as a country. That new book that I've written on the Empowered University says that universities need to look in the mirror and to appreciate what you have that's good. And you've got so much that's wonderful here in your country, so much that's wonderful. The culture, give yourselves a round of applause. You got to believe, it's so important. Sure to believe. And yet there are ways in which you know you can be better. I've been asking people all day long, who are your most impressive and famous scientific leaders? And people have been, this is not just for your island, this is a challenge in my country too. So often people don't know what name to give. Because we as a society have not, and that's beyond this country in America, we've not thought about the role that scientists, engineers, and others play. I had a young engineer say to me last night that he goes sometimes and people don't know the difference between an electrician and an engineer. And the role that engineers play. Do you realize, you may or may not, that the number one reason that the average lifespan has gone well over into the 70s is actually engineering? People think of medicine. Medicine is important, but the National Academy of Engineering has proven that if it were not for clean water and the sewage system, you know what the average age was in 1900? What do you think? Tell me. It was in the 40s, okay? How many of you in this room are over 45? Will you admit it? So all y'all are under 45, is that what you said? How many of y'all know how to lie real well, all right? The point is that without, just as a one fact, just the idea that without clean water, without the sewage system, many of us would not be alive today. Why am I telling you that? The challenge that any society faces in the 21st century will be to build a cadre of people who are, yes, grounded in the humanities, who understand ethical considerations, but many more who appreciate what we can do with math and science, engineering, health disparities. In my own country, as I look at our society, yes, we've made progress. In our country, what we know is this, that we've moved from in the mid-60s when I went to jail to having only 10% of Americans had graduated from college, from a four-year college, only 10%. For blacks, it was about 2%. Today, we're up to about 35% in general, and for blacks, it's probably 21%. For Latinos, it's still only 15%. And the big challenge that we are arguing about right now is that if a kid is from low-income background, the probability of graduating from college for our country is still under 20%. So we know we have work to do. But the other part is this. When thinking about health disparities, when thinking about all the national agencies in my country, as a result of chairing the Obama Commission on Education, I got all that data. Not one national agency in our country, in America, can say that even 1% of the scientists are black. Now think about sickle cell anemia. Think about all those challenges that we face based on different racial backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds. We need physicians and scientists from all those groups. What you are known for is several things. Number one, when you get educated, you are very well educated. You are extraordinary. You've had that British system that you get for the best is among the best. There's no doubt about that. And give yourselves a round of applause. So when you get that education, but the question I ask you is the question I ask my own country. But what about the children who cannot read? At the foundation of math and engineering and physics will be reading skills. How many of you in this room love to read? Let me see your hands. Raise your hands now. You know you love to read, right? Now watch this. How many of you love mathematics? You see how the numbers go down some? Usually somebody will ask me the question, how do you put love and math in the same sentence, right? How many of you knew by the time you were in the 12th grade that you were either a math science type or you are a history and English and arts type? Raise your hands. How many of you were not sure? How many of you were good in both? A few, all right? So one of my challenges to you for children and for our society is to stop thinking that people are one type or the other. That regardless of what you are interested in, you can still know more in the other area. The majority of jobs in our world will have a heavy technological focus. And so for my campus, which has students from 100 countries, which has hundreds of students who are the children of Caribbean folks who've come from all over, who come there and are living, and their children are on my campus now. And what I see is this. When people come from other countries, there's an intensity. There's a hunger. And they do extraordinarily well. So give the people who do move to America, but give them a round of applause for what they do. And this is what I want to challenge you to think about. How can you create a culture building on the strengths you have right now that will have you asking the hard questions? Who are those scientific leaders? How do we create a cadre of people who are known for research in science or for technology? And you've got some great examples. I love seeing what you're doing with the robotics, Mr. Prime Minister. I love the fact that 2 years ago, children from St. Kitts won that competition, that STEM video competition. Very interesting, involving the natural repellent for mosquitoes. Right? You've got brain power here that needs the opportunity. Give your kids a round of applause for that national competition. A big round of applause like you did for that music, like you did for that television. But this is what I want you to think about. We must teach our children that they love math, that they love to read, that they are inquisitive. Hrabowski said that when he was growing up in New York, he was a Nobel laureate. All of his friends' mothers would ask them at the end of a school day, what'd you learn in school today? He said, but not my mother. My mother would say, Izzy, did you ask a good question today? And the practice of encouraging his curiosity made him the thinker he became. I want you to encourage your children to ask good questions. I want you to encourage them to want to do the math. And when they say, do you like math? Tell them you're still learning it. If you don't like it, just say, I'm still learning it. Because that's the point. You can never stop learning. And so here is my final point that I want you to really think about. When you think about the leaders for the next century, when you think about them for the next decade, how does this country identify early on children who can be excited about math and science and engineering, who can think about it. I had the privilege today of meeting a son of St. Kitts. His name is Larry Quinlan. Now here's a young man who is the Chief Global Information Officer for Deloitte Touche. Think about it. The chief, the number one person in technology in the world, a graduate of schools in St. Kitts. Give him a big round of applause. You know, y'all can be real proper now, come on. When you hear about one of your graduates, one of your sons, you must celebrate that. As much as we celebrate the music, as much as we celebrate the door prizes, because your values are seen by the way you perform, by the way you act, about what you believe in. I want you to be as powerful in your passion for education as for anything, because where would we be? And for the children who don't have the advantages that other children have. That is the key to it all. You know, I close with this idea. My vision for 40 years has been to produce students of color in a predominantly white setting, helping all kinds of students, but particularly to produce African Americans who would be excellent in science. We have never in this world seen a black earn the Nobel Prize in medicine. We've done it in literature, we've done it in peace, right? And we have somebody from the Caribbean who's done it in economics. Give him a round of applause for having done it in economics. But never in medicine or science. The lead neuroscientist, young investigator in the world, is one of my graduates. He is from America, but his parents are from Ghana. His name is Hrabowski, D-Z-A-R-S-A. I want you to go look him up. He's a neuroscientist. He's one of 4 black males who graduated from my campus. One of them got MD, PhDs. They're now tenured faculty at Duke University in neuroscience. Give him a round of applause, big round of applause. But here is the message. The Surgeon General of our country is a young black man who came to me years ago at 17. He had never even seen a black doctor. But we gave him that exposure. Exposure told him, you can do this. He went on and got degrees and from Berkeley and other places and Indiana, and now he's the Surgeon General, the doctor for the country. And he goes back talking about coming out of a little rural town where they'd never seen a black doctor. People can't dream to be what they've never seen. And so I would argue and challenge you to think about ways of bringing people, particularly from the diaspora, the wonderful graduates of Caribbean institutions who've gone away and come back, to let children and others see, as you work to prepare your teachers, as you work to infuse and redesign math and science in K through 12, we are in our country infusing computing education in elementary, middle, and high school. It's a big deal. It really is. Our most exciting program is for middle school girls in the yoga and coding. Did you hear that? Yoga and coding, to make more girls excited about and confident, because the coding will get you jobs at all levels, not just bachelor's level, more and more jobs. Half the jobs in technology are coming from people with certificates, 2-year programs. How do you become creative in coming up with all kinds of pathways to get people into that work? So I close with this idea. That gentleman that I mentioned, Hrabowski, who is by far now #1 young investigator from the Society of Neuroscience in the world, first black ever. He has invented a pacemaker for the brain to address mental disorders, from bipolar to schizophrenia. And he said this to me. He said, the time will come in a few years when we will be able to implant something in your brain and I can look at you and communicate with you without ever moving my lips. That's how impactful technology is going to be. It can be scary. Imagine that I've got some technology and I can look at you and know what you're thinking when you're telling me to shut up here. You get me? But the idea is that technology, how many of you remember a time when you didn't have a cell phone? You can tell the age of people by that. Young people always had cell phones. There was a time when we thought the idea of cell phone was ridiculous because you're going to always have a cord, so you can't go but so far. Remember, because we didn't know about wireless technology. Technology is going to change everything you do, whether you're in America or here. And so I challenge you, St. Kitts and Nevis, To think about the fact that you have excellence in your students in these areas, but you must tell them that. You must expose them. And just as the Prime Minister says in his prosperity agenda, it must become real. STEM must become as real as your music. It must become a part because it is the future for humankind. So I challenge you to watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. Now get back up and let's say it. Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. And I want you to say it like you mean it. Like you mean it with passion. Thoughts, words, actions, habits, character, destiny. God bless you all. Thank you.